And welcome back to the Livingston Parish News Weekly Show. My name is McHugh David, publisher and editor of the news. Appreciate you guys joining us this morning. We have a special guest, Mr. William Scott Dykes. He is running for District Judge Division F, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, here in the 21st Judicial District, which is, people don't all know this, it is Livingston, St. Helena, and Tangipahoa. So it is a 3-parish district. Sir, good morning. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate you having you here.
Good morning. Thank you.
So we're going to jump right into it.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about, your early life, high school, college, where'd you go to law school, that kind of thing.
Okay. Well, I grew up in Montpelier. That's where I was born. My family owned a feed store, so I worked there from a very young age. We also had beef cattle. My grandfather had a dairy and hogs at one time, so thank goodness I didn't have to do that much. But that's a tough job, and
sure.
Of course we've lost a ton of dairies in this area, and I understand why. But it's a shame, but we have.
Right. And so, where'd you go to high school?
Oak Forest. I went from kindergarten through 12th grade.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where'd you go to college?
Southeastern first. I went criminal justice. Then after that, I applied to 2 law schools, but my father had open heart surgery about 2 weeks before I was supposed to find out whether or not I got into law school. And so I had to withdraw my name and work at our business for about a year. And so it set me back a year. But my mother and father who ran that part of the business were both at the hospital. And so,
sure.
And then of course we had beef cattle at the same time. So we had a farm I had to take care of as well. I have an older brother that helped, but it was a lot.
Sure. But obviously you got past that and got into law school. So where'd you go? Where'd you end up?
Southern Law School.
Okay.
And I started there, finished there. It was a great learning experience. Had a lot of friends. I had a couple of friends that I grew up with that were actually there with me. So
let's back up just a second. You're doing criminal justice in Southeastern. So would you say that your desire to be in law kind of came in high school?
Probably before that. I always had an interest in it, but really at one time I wanted to be a narcotics agent.
Okay.
And so, that's where it began. I can't really tell you why. I don't know. It might have been watching TV shows, movies. I really can't tell you why. I just remember at a young age that was something that really interested me. Like undercover work, things like that. It seemed like it was interesting, as a young kid. That's
Sure. But as you got older, clearly your mindset shifted a little bit. When you were thinking about, going to Southeastern out of high school, did you immediately think I'm going into criminal justice? Was that right off the bat?
No, actually, I thought about going into medical.
Okay.
And I had an interest in either. I wasn't quite sure, but I liked maybe vet, maybe nurse, maybe a doctor. I wasn't quite sure. So I started in general studies. I was thinking about, like I said, going maybe through the medical field, and I realized that wasn't for me. Just wasn't what I wanted to do. Then I changed to criminal justice. Of course, I'd always kind of had an interest in that. So once I started that, the head of the department, Dr. Sullenberger, was, I had so much fun in his classes. We had a lot of arguments back and forth.
Sure.
And I think it was my junior year. He pulled me to the side, asked me to come, hey, come talk to me after class. And here I am thinking I'm in trouble. I've argued too much, and he brought me in. We talked for probably 20 minutes, and the whole time was about, you're going to law school. And I was like, well, no, I'm probably going to law enforcement. No, you're going to law school. This is why. And, I told him, I said, I always thought about it, but, I just don't know how I'd be as an attorney. He said, I'm telling you right now, go to law school.
So obviously argumentative from an early point in your life, which is a good part of being a lawyer. What was your, mindset walking out of that meeting? Like, what were you thinking? What were the wheels turning in your head?
Well, first off, I was just, I was really amazed that he took the time to do that. I mean, he didn't have to do that at all. He could have just went on with his day.
Sure.
And so it really touched me that he took the time to say, hey, this is what you really need to do. I've seen a lot of students. I mean, he was head of the department. So he took the time to really sit down, talk to me, and say, hey, I think this would be a great field for you to go in. I think you'd do great at it. And so, I mean, that was the first thing that I was thinking about. Wow, I can't believe he did that.
Right.
And then, of course, then I started kind of looking into it and trying to decide, hey, is this something I think I can do? And, in high school, I thought about it, but, like I said, it just wasn't something that I was sure about. And, but I think when he led me that way, I just never looked back.
Rolled forward with it with one small trial, obviously, with your father, but you made it through, and yes. you went into college or out of college into law school. Right. Pardon me. So as you're going through law school, what are you thinking as the end draws near? I mean, are you thinking, I'm going to go out and I'm going to open my own practice, I'm going to join a practice? What were your thoughts as you kind of progressed through law school?
Well, to be quite honest, when you first start, you're not thinking about anything. At least I wasn't. I was just trying to, I mean, it's a whole new world. They throw a lot at you, more than you can do. And I mean, it's trying. A lot of people drop out. I had a good friend that dropped out, and they said it's not for them. And then as you get in the second year, you get into a groove. It gets a little easier as far as what to expect, and how to prepare, and what you can do, what you can't do. And as soon as second year was about halfway through it, I started talking to my father about working at a law firm. And so my third year, I worked for Eric Pittman in Denham Springs.
Okay.
I clerked for him for a year, just writing papers, things like that, getting a feel for what you actually do as an attorney. And that helped me a lot. I mean, it showed me. He was been practicing for a long time. He had another lawyer in his office that had been practicing for a while that was older. So I had some good people to look up to. And then when I got out of law school, I just kept working for him. And as I, passed the bar and sworn in, the train derailment happened in Amite. Well, it happened on my family's property, and a lot of people that had worked for my family for many years had to evacuate their homes, and they didn't know when they would get to go back, how they were going to pay for a hotel room. I mean, 2:00 in the morning, they just had to leave,
Right.
And they told them grab a bag and go. And well, they didn't know what to grab or anything. They didn't know what to do. So the next day, they were calling my father, and he was like, look, go talk to them. They need somebody. And it wasn't as an attorney. It was really just to go, like I said, as friends, kind of, because I grew up around these men and their families, and so many of their kin had worked for us. And so it was really about that at first. And after a while, they were out of their homes for quite a few days, and, worried about all the stuff, where it was contaminated, things like that. So it just worked into a business relationship, I guess, later on, because I had to ended up representing a lot of them.
So you ended up really having your own firm in a way.
Well, I was working for Eric Pittman at that time. Okay. Later on, I ended up becoming a junior partner, then a partner, and then so I kind of had my own firm at that point, even though we worked together, I guess would be a better way to describe it.
Sure. And so what's interesting about that is you now have your own firm.
Yeah.
You're also a public defender. So you kind of cut your teeth in sort of a bit of public defense because you were or at least helping these people who you grew up around.
Yes. I started off in Amite and Livingston as a public defender. So I did know, you get a lot of people that come through there. I knew some of them, grew up with some of them or their families. So, yeah, I knew a lot of people that I ended up representing, or at least their families.
So, tell us a little bit about, we know that you are an attorney, but what it's like to be a public defender, which is what now, obviously, when you qualified, we talked about it. You had to resign that post. But tell us a little bit about your experiences during that time.
Well, when I first started, I still had a full practice, so I was trying to. It's tremendous amount of work, and of course they've cut that down a lot now. When I first started, you had two divisions. Well, I had Judge Doug Hughes. I had him in Amy and in Livingston. So
Okay.
now they have just one parish, one judge. Each judge has a public defender and a ADA. In each parish. So it's not as the workload's a lot less.
Right.
Even though they have 6 judges now, back then they had 8. So
Okay. So, I mean, what do you like? Tell us a little bit about the day to day. I mean, what it's like to kind of work on that side, I guess you can say, of public law.
well, of course, it's a lot of paperwork. I mean, you have to read a lot of police reports, things like that. You also have to do a lot of paperwork to keep up with your time. How mileage. I mean, all kind of stuff. If you have to drive to another parish to go visit with somebody that's in a facility, or if you have to things like that. If you got to go look at a crime scene, you got to keep up with your mileage. If you go as far as you got to put how many cases you have. You got to, now, of course, our computer system does a lot of that now, but when I first started, you had to go through it.
It was old school paper.
It was a lot of it.
So, tell us a little bit about, as a public defender, you probably have, much like some of those ADAs, a very close proximity relationship to a lot of these judges. Tell us a little bit about how your relationship with those judges has kind of molded your experience as a lawyer, and what that relationship would provide for you should you win the bench.
Well, when I first started, we were with Doug Hughes, and if you knew him, I mean, he was always in a good mood. He's always got a smile, and I did some juvenile work with him as well, and I mean, I learned so much by watching him, and how he, with juveniles, try to grab their attention. You got a short window, and to make a difference. They're obviously doing something wrong because they're in front of him. So, he's trying to stop that now. And, there's still people that are 17 through, early 20s that are still like that. You got to try and catch them, because if you don't stop their behavior now, they're going to end up, as you would say, lifelong criminals in a way. And there are some out there that, you can really make a difference with. And I've seen it. That's one of the gifts, I guess, that I've learned from the public defender's office, that there are people out there that if you really take time, you really, talk to them and give them insight that they've never had before, show them that there's a way they can get a job, they can make money, and there's a better way to do it. I've had some great success with that.
Explain to us what kind of cases go through Division F before we kind of jump into the next part of the question.
Okay, well, it's criminal and civil, but it doesn't do family law and it doesn't do juvenile. Yeah.
So, as a public defender,
yes,
going through that, how would representing those defendants affect the way that you would be a judge if you won the bench?
Well, I've seen it from both sides, so it helps. In other words, I've been on the other side, as you say, as defending someone that is truly innocent. They have somebody that has, put charges against them. That person, and this is one of the first cases I had, it was probably 3-4 months in, had a guy that was accused of a crime. He spent 7 months in jail. He gets out because I can't remember exactly why. An officer had to be on vacation, something, so we missed our trial date. So he gets out for a month and a half. We show up to court. He's sitting on a pew, and all of a sudden he comes running up to me. Man, you got to talk to this guy. And he's all excited. And I'm like, man, calm down. Don't get us in trouble before it starts. It ends up the victim was sitting next to him, and they were just talking. And neither one knew who they were there on the same case. They didn't know it. So after they had talked for a few minutes, the victim looks at him and said, man, you're 6 inches taller, way more than this guy. You're not the guy. Even though he looked like it in the lineup. I mean, they look a lot alike. I mean, it's the best lineup I've ever seen. But, things like that happen. So we were set for trial, about to get ready to pick a jury, and victim comes in and says, that's not the person.
Wow. So
yeah.
You've had real life experience with all this on both sides.
Absolutely.
So as a judge, when you're thinking about walking in on that first day, should you be elected, what are you thinking? Like, what's your mindset to be the best judge that you can be?
Be fair. Each person that comes before you, that's the most important case they have, because that's the only case they have. A lot of times, as an attorney, you have so many cases. When I started at the public defender's office, we'd have 500 cases or more. And I'm talking about felony cases, not misdemeanors. And, how do you sort through that, pick out which ones, you can't spend days and weeks on every case at 500. So you have to be able to go through it. You got to figure out which ones, you got to talk to them, figure out which ones want just a deal, which ones want they're going to go to trial. And it's a difficult balance.
Sure.
So,
well, and that leads into the next question. You said you have to be fair. There's a balance to strike. How do you remain that way? It's very, very tough to be a judge. You're constantly hearing cases. You're constantly seeing guilty, innocent. What are some of the things that you've learned along the way that can help you to be and remain impartial and balanced?
Well, like I said, knowing that every person that comes before you, no matter who's representing them, it doesn't matter. I've had, people that aren't involved in law come to me and say, as a public defender, you only represent the guilty. Well, that's not always the case. And so my experience, I believe, should help me, doing so much criminal work, because I've done thousands of felony cases. I mean, I couldn't even count how many I've done. And, some people, like I said, they were obviously guilty. Some it's questionable. Others, it was, 100% that they were innocent. We just had to get that evidence forward. And, they had alibis, or they were somewhere else. And I had one person that was on camera somewhere else, so they, obviously they weren't where they said they were at that time. A lot of times eyewitness testimony, that's, it's not the best. Everybody thinks it is, but it's really not. So,
right. So thinking about all those things and the experiences that you've had, you've already talked about one situation you've been in that was kind of interesting and especially with regard to lineups and,
right.
Going through sort of the whole process and then having sort of this last minute, drop the brakes on it. Hold on. Let's dig a little deeper on personal experience. Tell us a little bit about what was one of the hardest cases you've ever been involved in, or one of the hardest trials, rather, one that involved a judge. What was the hardest thing about it, and how did you overcome that?
Well, probably one of the hardest cases never went to trial. We got all the way up to trial, actually a couple times. It was a first-degree non-capital murder, and just the facts of it. The person that ended up being a victim, had been arrested for something else, a pretty bad crime. And, it was hard because you're sitting here looking at this person and I'm like, it's a military vet. He just doesn't look like the type of person that just did what he said he did. And, I don't know if he had mental problems, if he had, PTSD, what's making him say things that don't add up. And then there's always a different story. It's never the same story. So, something's obviously wrong. And so, and that's usually what the most difficult cases are, the ones where somebody has some kind of mental illness or long-term drug use, which may cause mental illness. And so, when you have mental illness or drug use, did it drug use cause mental illness, or did the mental illness, that cause them to, be a drug user? Because that's a lot of people don't realize that when somebody has mental illness and they don't get, diagnosed, well, they go out and they find some kind of drug that makes them feel better. And, so it's self-medicating.
Sure. And so as a judge, how do you work through that?
Well, first off is, you hope that the public defender or the private attorney for the defense and the prosecutor work together. And a lot of times, most of the time they do. And they'll come up with, hey, judge, look, this person really has a mental problem. We'd like to get him, looked at, see if there's something that can be done, because I've had people that will never come out of the mental institute. They may, but I doubt it. They've been there for 10 years. So.
Right. So a lot of it is about, I guess you can say, a communication between the judge, public defender, private attorney. So being able to remain balanced, as you said through that story, is a lot about not just sitting up at the bench and firing off guilty and not guilty. A lot of it is about communication.
Correct. Yeah.
So, with that, and that may be the answer to this next question, when you're a judge, when you're sitting up there on the bench, from your perspective, what's the biggest challenge? Is that it? Is making sure that line of communication stays open, or is it something else?
Well, you always want the line of communication to stay open, and you always have to have the prosecutor and the defense attorney there when you have that communication. It's always good to sit down. Judge Morrison had a great way of doing pretrials. He would bring both attorneys in, the prosecutor, defense attorneys, and they would sit down together and you'd work the cases. And, you look at it and you say, okay, work out deals and stuff. Is this a case we got to go to trial with? Is this a case we can do a deal? And, I used to love that. I thought that was great because you don't have the client listening. You don't have the victims listening, and you can kind of hash out, the legal part of it and just get to the bottom and say, hey, this is what we got and this is what we're looking at.
Right. Because a lot of times trials can drag on. They can drag people into it that may not have either wanted to participate or needed to be a part of it, like you said, for a lot of different reasons. So that's interesting. So when you're thinking about running for the bench, but you've also been involved in your community, obviously going all the way back to that train derailment. How do you perceive yourself as trying to stay involved?
Well,
which I know is difficult as a judge. It is, I know.
Yeah, because you have lines that you can't cross as a judge, and you never want to be in a situation where somebody comes, "Hey, judge, look, I got to come before you. What's going to happen in this?" Or so you have to be real careful. But there's always ways that you can still be part of the community. Donate time. They have speaking engagements. Hopefully, I'd like to be able to talk to maybe at colleges and high schools where you can go in and kind of tell them a little bit about what happens in court. That's probably, now that I think about it, I remember as young, I think I was maybe in middle school, we went to court and watched it one day, and it was very interesting to me. I had people that were about to fall asleep, and I'm sitting there like, wow, this is neat how the interactions go, the arguing goes, and I'm like, wow, you can get to argue. That's always fun. So yeah, I started at a young age with that.
Well, thinking about that argumentation, where do you feel that takes you in terms of being a judge? Does that mean you're going to give people a little pushback in the courtroom? Is it something you have to leave behind? How do you feel about that argumentative part of yourself that's made you, such a good attorney?
Well, obviously you don't want to argue with the attorneys, but I think what it'll do instead is you have to set boundaries. So I believe the boundaries will limit that. So let's pull it all together here. You're running for 21st Judicial District, Division D. There's so many D's in there. Division F.
F, I'm sorry.
D was last.
Yeah, that was last year. Woo.
Yeah.
Let's try that again because there's a lot of D's in there. I was just trying to make sure I got through all the D's. You are running for 21st Judicial District, Division F.
Right.
That is Livingston Parish, St. Helena, and Tangipahoa.
That's right.
Give us your 2 minutes. Why, pulling everything together we've talked about this morning, why should people vote for you?
Well, my experience for one, right now I'm the magistrate in Springfield, town attorney for Killian. I've had 18 years of courtroom experience. So I've been in the courtroom since I started. A lot of people ask me, what does that mean? Actual or real courtroom experience. That's what it means. I've been there. As a public defender, at least 1 week out of every month, I was in court. When I moved to St. Helena, every Friday I was in court. At the same time, I've always had a private practice, so I still have civil matters, so I still go to court on that. I have cases. I've had cases in every federal court, like the Eastern, the Middle, and the Western District, Court of Appeals, Louisiana Supreme Court. So I've had a case all over Louisiana. I've done just about any kind of law that would come before me. And so I've seen it, probably had a case like that. And, so I know the law, I know how it should be applied. And I really feel that my experience sets me apart and it makes me uniquely qualified for this position.
So again, Mr. William Scott Dykes running for 21st Judicial District Court Division F. Got it that time. Sir, thank you very much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. And look, before we go, I just want to put a shout out to my family. If you've never ran for a race, I promise you don't know. It is difficult. Okay. It's a lot of hours, a lot of work. And my wife, she does so much for me. She's got the kids, she's got her job, and she helps me with the campaign. So my kids, they're used to seeing me at home. I try to spend as much time with them as I can, and it's hard to do. So on the weekends, we try and do stuff together. And, I've got 2 girls, one that's about to be 14, one that just turned 9, and it's tough on them. So I just want to tell them thank you. Because without them, I couldn't do it. And they're the reason I'm doing this. I'm trying to make a difference. I just want to be able to help people, and I want to show them that it's possible.
Well, and thank you for that, sir. And thank you to Mr. Dykes' family supporting him through this race. And again, Mr. William Scott Dykes running for district judge in 21st Judicial District Court, Division F. That's St. Helena, Tangipahoa, and right here in Livingston. One last time, my name is McHugh David, publisher and editor of the news. Appreciate you guys joining us for the Livingston Parish News Weekly Show. Want to remind everybody we are on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube. We are once a week in print on Thursdays. You can get that in your mailbox for $7 a month. And we are also online, www.livingstonparishnews.com. We have a podcast page, which is free, currently covering the coronavirus, which is also free. And we have a breaking news page, which is free as well. We do hope you all have a great day. Please remember, we're still kind of waiting to see what the election season is going to look like. As we're waiting for a new plan to come from Secretary of State Kyle Ardwan after a district court judge a federal court judge, did rule that the plan must be changed. So as of right now, early voting will be the week before the November 3rd election. Then there'll be a week break and then always on Tuesday. I love it. So please vote. Don't forget, if you don't vote, you can't complain. So we hope you all have a great day and we will see you next time.